Testing. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2025 Newington College Regatta. It's an overcast day out here at the Sydney International Regatta Centre, but nonetheless, fantastic conditions for still water rowing. Joined up in the commentary tower this morning by Marty Nicholas. Good morning, Marty, and we're looking forward to kicking off racing in just a short moment with the school year 10 fourth 8 contested across 4 lanes. We're looking for a start any moment now. You can see if you're joining us on the live stream or out here at the Regatta Centre that the crews are assembling themselves down at the 2,000 metre starting blocks. So in lane 4 it's St Ignatius, represented by Hugo Harper, Sydney McCosker, Tom Cuschieri, Theodore Hennessy, Caelan Strudwick, John Malone, Angus Lund, Jacob Collins, Teddy Hardy is their coxswain, their coach is Timothy Sequel. In lane 5, it's the crew from the King School, represented by Harry Mann, Sudi Betwal, Benjamin Deal, Joe Russell, Frankie Love, Darcy Bragg, Ilan Elvey, Bill McLean and their cox Cooper Morgan. In lane 6 from St Joseph's is Liam Shee, Oliver Hunter, Callum Patton, Digby Cullen, Kashu Terence Tang, Hunter Lee Young, Ariane Wettersing, Alistair Beale West and their coxswain Patrick Scott. And finally from Shaw in lane 7, so that's on the closer side to the grandstand, Ian Yip, Jude Jansen, Nathan Baronga, Louis Kordek, Christian Chalinsky, Oliver Thompson, Graham Pennefather, Daniel Chapman and their coxswain Thomas Mann. And we should have a start in just a few short moments. So we're looking at a start very shortly, by the looks of things, in race 1 on the program, the Year 10 4th 8. We were just having a conversation up here in the tower about this likely being the very first sweep or 2,000 metre race that these boys are competing in. We're lining up on the start, so it's no mean feat to position an 8-oared boat. That's very long on the starting blocks down the 2,000 metre blocks.
Interesting too, Mike, that we were chatting earlier about how Shaw and Kings and Riverview had a particularly strong senior set of results at the head of the river, and perhaps no surprise that the depth in those schools means we've got just those 3 schools represented for the 4th Year 10-8.
Yeah, that's right, Marty. And it's, as you say, those schools, a fair amount of depth and competition drives and participation drives success at the top end of the program. So really looking forward to seeing these guys get underway for what should be their first run down the course of the 2025-26 season, and indeed their first race over 2,000 metres in the 8s. And this is really the breeding ground, the training ground for these guys in the 8s as they progress through the senior years, and who knows how many of these youngsters we'll see in a couple of years' time lining up in the first 8s for the big dance. But here we go, we are underway. We've got a start in the 2025 season, and it looks as though it's the crew from St Ignatius in lane 4 over the far side of the course that's making the best of things so far. It's a crew from Kings in lane 5 just floating with the boys in the centre course there. And Marty, of course, you can speak to this. Not as easy as it looks from the outside to jump into that coxswain seat, of course, and to to wrestle with the weight and the shifting momentum of an 8-oared boat. How do you see that playing out for these young coxswains over 2,000 metres?
Oh, look, definitely, Mike. I think the irony is the more senior and the more elite the boat you're coxing, the easier it is to steer, because you've got a well-balanced and matched boat. The timing's typically a lot better, and the variation in rowing and in strength on different sides of the boat tends to make it much more difficult to steer these 4th and 3rd junior 8s. And given these guys are in there, as you mentioned earlier, in their first ever sweep or rowing race, you know, there's often a little bit of unfamiliarity with some of the feathering and squaring, how comfortably they get in and out of the water, and we've seen a little bit of that already in this race with the King's crew having a couple of crabs early on as they get accustomed to rowing over 2,000. Yeah,
that's right. And so if you're not accustomed to some of these terms that we're using in rowing, there's 2 disciplines. There's sculling with 2 oars and sweep oar, which is what we're seeing on the screen right now, which is where every athlete in the boat has 1 oar. And feathering is the way that the oars, the handles are being turned in order to lift the blade out of the water and skim across and then take the next stroke. So it's a shift from the junior years where the guys will compete in sculling events, and in year 10 they move into the sweep oar races, which is what we're seeing unfold for the first time for these boys out on course. This morning we saw just earlier on screen the St Ignatius crew in lane 4, and they were making the best of things in no small part, I would suggest, because the timing in that crew was really good, taking their strokes at the same time, putting the blades in. It just helps the boat keep nice and fresh and trim across the water. You can see that Shaw crew in lane 7 on the screen now. And they're doing a really decent job of making sure that their blades are entering the water at the same time. And of course, it's not just about the timing of the entry of the blade into the water. It's about the synchronization across the whole crew in terms of their body movements, keeping their hands low, the low carry, and that clean entry into the water. And St Ignatius putting on a clinic out the front of the pack here as we come through the 1,000 metres.
I think for this age category too, having raced only over 1,000 metres in the quads in years 8 and 9, they'll get a new appreciation for the full 2,000 metre distance today, which is obviously a much stiffer and sterner test, and maintaining speed through the second half of the race will be something we'll see a lot from some of the more senior crews in the GPS 4s and obviously the 8s a little bit later on. But typically this third 500 they enter now is commonly the slowest of the 4 quarters of the race, and as the year goes through or the season moves through and fitness improves, most of the crews will be trying to either even split or make sure this third quarter is well rode.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. And it's as you say, it's 2,000 metres a race. It really is a different beast compared to 1,000 metres. It's not quite a sprint, perhaps over 2,000 metres. There's a certain degree to which each of the crews are going to have to expend their energy strategically across the duration of the race, whereas 1,000 metres is kind of a fly and die exercise, often in the junior years of competition. But certainly a fair degree of self-control. Like, that's a new skill for some of these. It will be a new skill for the lads out on course this morning to make sure that they expend their energy in a measured way. And of course, this is probably the first of 2 races that these guys will get this morning. So, as we said earlier, a really good chance to just get some runs on the board and hit out over 2,000 metres.
Yeah, and that second 1,000 puts a premium on good technique and efficient rowing, as we see the Riverview crew come through the 1,500 metre mark with a commanding lead. They're rating low, rowing long. There's some quite big bodies in that boat. I suspect there'll be a host of newcomers to the sport. Usually year 10 is an opportunity for some boys who may not have started at the beginning of the program in year 7 or 8, depending on how the schools kick off those programs. But they'll arrive in year 10, and often the good athletes can move quite quickly into the senior crews and enjoy a lot of success thereafter. But definitely the Riverview crew looking in good control of their rhythm and length and their form, and no surprise that they've got a commanding lead with about 300 metres to go, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Marty. And that Ignatius crew looking really strong as they come into the final 250 metres or thereabouts of the race. And, gee, this water is just sublime for rowing, just cutting glass out there. And the Ignatius crew probably just lifting their rates slightly, practicing their high rate effort maybe in the last 200 metres or so. And of course, it's really important that as these crews develop in their skills and their experience across 2,000 metres, that there is a certain reserve for what needs to be a really, really strong finish in many of these races as they come to the pointy end of the season. They need to be able to, make sure it's there. But Ignatius doing really well, and they are looking poised to claim the first race of the day, in school year 10, 4th 8. Hugo Harper, Sydney McCosker, Tom Cuschieri, Theodore Hennessy, Caelan Strudwick, John Malone, Angus Lund, Jacob Collins, Teddy Hardy in the coxswain seat. Well done, gentlemen. And St Ignatius opened the account for 2025-26 season with a win. Here's Kings in the final 100 metres of their race. This is Harry Mann, Sudip Betwal, Benjamin Deal, Joe Russell, Frankie Love, Darcy Bragg, Ilan Elvey, Bill McLean, and their coxswain Cooper Morgan.
Slight correction there, Mike. That's Shaw crossing over in lane 7. Good performance from the boys in their first hit out of the year.
Thank you, Marty. Right you are. That's the Shaw crew in lane 7. That's Yip, Jansen, Bronga, Kordek, Chilinsky, Thompson, Pennefather, Chapman, and Mann. And here is that King's crew in lane 5. As we said before, we didn't get a start from St Joseph's in lane 6.
Looks too, Mike, like one of the Riverview boys might have been generous enough to fill in the 5 seat there, if I'm not mistaking the Zoot suit. So good to see the schools combining to make sure the Kings boys get a row in this first round of the Year 10 4th 8s.
So just recapping the results of race 1, it was a win for St Ignatius in lane 4, second place to the Shaw School in lane 7, and third place to the King's School in lane 5. And we'll head back down to the other end of the competition lake, where race 2 is underway. And if you're joining us on the live stream or out here in the grandstands, you can see on the big screen that we are underway. And the crews are approaching the 750 metre mark in the race. It's the school year 10 third 8. So in lane 4, representing St Joseph's, is TJ Delahunt Higgins, Alexander Coury, Liam Hill, William Carroll, Jed Volkovsky, Oscar Petronov, Alexander Petronov, Isaac Smith, and their coxswain is Patrick Madden. In lane 5, representing the Shaw School, is Tom Roxburgh, Jeremy Hughes, William Hadfield, Hamish Parry Okerton, Luke Bulfin, Daniel Walwick, Archie Watson, Ollie Hamilton, and their coxswain is William Thompson. In lane 6, representing the King's School, Edward Arantz, Jack Boyce, Digby Huggins, Lincoln Ripperell, Reggie Thomas, Alex Varchich, Yash Goyal, Hayden Duke, and their coxswain is Jack Molyneux. And finally in lane 7, representing St Ignatius Riverview, is Jimmy Kelly, Jack Matthews, Jamie McRae, Oliver Byrne, Sam Vecchio, Xavier Kennedy, Zaire Forrester, Jack Edwards. Their coxswain is Scotch O'Connor, and their coach is Marcus Bambagiotti.
And Mike, we've got a ding-dong battle there between Riverview and Shaw through the 1,000 metre mark, just 0.08 of a second separating the two crews, both rating 31, 32 strokes to the minute, so relatively low, but you'd expect to see them be able to hold those rates and that speed at that kind of rate in a schoolboy year 10 third 8 at this time of the year. And this one could be a very interesting one as we move into the heartbreaking third quarter.
Yeah, fascinating competition evolving on this near side of the course. And as you say, rate 32, 33 coming through the 1250 in just a short moment. You can expect that rate, the skills required to meet and sustain a higher rate of striking to increase for all of these crews as the season progresses, and maintaining that a high rate of striking, maintaining the power, maintaining the length, that all just comes with experience and time in the boat, and of course syncing together as a crew and making sure that all the movements are blended. And these are all the things that we speak about as rowing coaches and as rowers ourselves. And these are the things that these guys in the colours of the Shaw School and St Ignatius out there will be wanting to achieve. So it looks as though as we approach the 1,500 metres, well, there's barely anything in it, but I think it is Shaw ahead by less than half a length.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe a third of a length. Shaw rating 33 strokes to the minute, and the Riverview crew on 32. So again, pretty comparable, same sort of rhythm, same sort of consistency being maintained as we saw at the 1,000. And as you mentioned earlier, Mike, it might be a question of who at this time of the year has got the base and the will to step it up in the final 250 to secure the win.
And a really valuable opportunity for that, to have that ding-dong racing, as you said before, Marty. I mean, it's so valuable to be able to row and to compete kind of mentally against another crew and to hold your hand on the stove, so to speak, in the last 500 metres of a rowing race. And there's nothing quite like the experience of racing. I mean, training is one thing, and to have a paddle with an 8 next to you, but this is really, really valuable experience so early on in the season for these guys in the year 10 third 8 as we come into the final 200 metres or so of this race. It is Shaw in lane 5 up against St Ignatius in lane 7, and the Shaw School just lifting their rate of striking, I'd suggest, Marty, and they're looking really good and sitting up tall, a really commanding body position from each of the 8 rowers in that race. St Ignatius responding now. They're in the near side of the course in lane 7, probably just a little bit down on the Shaw School, but it's not over yet. Review lifting their rate of striking and responding now, and I think Shaw's going to have done enough, and they are going to take the win in this first race in the year 10 third 8. Shaw in lane 5, and they'll be really pleased with that. Second place going to St Ignatius. Congratulations to both of those crews. St Joseph's in lane 4. poised to claim third place in the third eight. Congratulations to St. Joseph's, and it'll be Kings in lane 6 who claim fourth place. So congratulations to Kings. That finalises the second race of this morning's program, the Year 10 third eight. It was a win for the Shaw School, second place to St. Ignatius, third place to St. Joseph's, and fourth place to Kings. And Marty, I'm encouraged by that early demonstration of competition between St. Ignatius and Shaw. Of course, as we said, two of the programs with some a fair amount of depth around the place. So really good to see so early on in the season. We'll move right along to race 3, the second eight, which is on the course. In lane 4 is Kings, represented by Monty Douglas, Harrison Barber, Ethan Zhang, Edward Thompson, Charlie Cullenwald, William Brown, Henry Slipper, and Henry Hunt. Their cox is Hunter Vickery. In lane 5 is St. Joseph's, represented by Samson Singh, Zach Fury, Angus Scott, James Irwin, Finn O'Byrne, Oliver Scott, Samuel Maloney, Ben Petherbridge, and their coxswain is Ben Davis. In lane 6 is St. Ignatius, represented by Frederick Dunn, Monty Hartman, Hunter Harris, Patrick Kane, Hugo Borman, Max Gordon Twaddle, Harrison Marshall, Nicholas Clock, and their coxswain is Liam Barnes. They're coached by Sam Carney. In lane 7, representing the Shaw School, is Nathan Clunte, Philip Ewan, Angus Edwards, Finn McIntosh, Toby Dalgleish, Cooper Sparks, Sam Kearse, Owen Barnes, and their cox, Owen King. And we're coming up to the 750 metres. I'd suggest, Marty, how do you see this one playing out?
Oh, look, it's a little bit of a mirror image of the previous one with the Riverview or St. Ignatius College and Shaw, both striking about 33 strokes to the minute and pretty much going head to head again. I think we can see a very narrow margin of about a canvas or perhaps a third of a length as they go through the 1,000 metres. And good to see Kings in striking distance, just within a boat length of St. Ignatius College in second at the moment, with St. Joseph's about a boat length and a half further back in fourth.
Yeah. Thanks, Marty. It's fantastic to see that overlap, as you say, between Shaw and St. Ignatius again, but Kings certainly not out of that picture for the top two placings yet either.
I think interestingly too, like most of the coaches will be encouraging the boys to keep their eyes in their own boat and stay very process orientated, trying to make sure they're taking it one stroke at a time and being very focused on consistent output over the 2,000 metres. But there is no substitute for overlapping with a competitor to make sure sort of motivation and energy and the kind of competitive spirit throughout the race is actually maintained. And being in contact, Mike, in these sort of races is really important for juniors too, who are often looking for a bit of validation for the hard work they've done in preparing for this being the first race of the year. And it's certainly very motivating as you know you're in contact and within that striking distance of not just the lead, but a competitive and an exciting and a fruitful season. Yeah, certainly, and those are really accurate comments, Marty. And as these young rowers kind of progress through the quads, I should say, and into the eights in year 10. It's been rowing's a game of fire and ice, and often it's more fire and less ice in those junior years. And as the athletes mature and they get through to the senior years, that's where you see a bit more maturity and experience come through and shine through in the performances on the water. And you've just seen the cruise pass with the 1,500 metres. It's again another strong battle between Shaw and Ignatius, lanes 6 and 7. So that's on the near side of the course if you're here on the grandstand side. And I think it is St. Ignatius by probably less than a boat length. I think they may have extended their lead ever so slightly from when we saw them pass through the 1,500 metres, but Shaw certainly not out of
not out of it yet, and they're over here in lane 7, and I think they might just be lifting their rate of striking compared to the Ignatius crew. We talk about consistent output, but I mean, this is where the crews will start to throw the kitchen sink.
Yeah, definitely. Good to see Kings too up on 35 strokes to the minute. You know, really holding on to the bow ball of the shore, or the stern, I should say, of the shore crew. So really strong and quick final 500 coming from the Kings School. But it's St Ignatius College in command here. They've stretched that 0.8 of a second lead at the 1500 metre mark to Clearwater now, and they'll go on to win the school second junior 8. In a very, very close finish, with Shaw just sneaking ahead of the fast finishing King's School, and St Joseph College making their way through the latter stages of the Red Boys, who'll be coming through in fourth.
It's an excellent finish from that crew from the King's School. Fantastic effort just to almost snatch that second place away from the Shaw School. Congratulations to Joey, who's finishing in fourth place. Just to finalise the third race on the program, the juniors second 8. It's a win for St Ignatius. Second place to Shaw, third place to Kings, and first place St Ignatius.
So we've got the schoolboy Year 10 first 8 coming up. It's a really, really good category, the Year 10 8s. I think most of the boys coming out of the quads get the opportunity to have the experience of a 9-man operation. There's usually a multiplier effect on team chemistry and mojo and shared commitment. It's a serious race, the Year 10 first 8, but not as serious as the seniors get, and I think the boys really get a taste for rowing in full as a team combination as they get into the Year 10s more broadly, and it's not uncommon for members of the schoolboy Year 10 first 8s to make the leap into the first 8 in the following season and be in Year 11 in the highest ranking crew within each of the schools. So usually high quality. Good to see some broader representation from Newington here as well. So first time we've seen our host today on the river. And Mike, how's the Year 10 8 unravelling?
Well, they're about to reach the 500 metres, I think. They've gone through the 500 metres, my apologies, and it was the Shaw School who went through looking the best. 0.156 the margin to St Joseph's, and 0.46 to St Ignatius, followed by Kings and Newington in that order. So it's another tense affair so far, Marty, in the opening stages of this race. The crews are coming up on the 750. I certainly wouldn't be writing anything in stone just yet. As you say, it's a good chance for these guys to just test themselves against the competition, and a high quality of rowing being demonstrated out there in these first Year 10 8s.
Yeah, 100%, Mike. And looks like the top 4 crews of Shaw, Ignatius, St Joseph's College and the King's School are all overlapping as the 1,000 metre mark gets approached. Looks like a slight tail started to emerge, Mike, if I'm not mistaking the wind direction there. And even looking at the first 500 metre time for the Year 10 first 8, going through in 1:32 and now 3:08 for the 1,000 metres. That's a really slick time for this time of year. Usually at the head of the river, this race is won in a sort of 6:08 to 6:12 category if the conditions are slightly favourable or relatively flat. So these guys are moving pretty quickly at this time of the year, and it's terrific to see four of the crews in close competition with one another.
Yeah, absolutely, and you could throw a blanket over them at the moment as the rain starts to come down here at the Regatta Centre. And as you said, Marty, probably a slight tail puffing at the stern ends of these Year 10 first 8s out on the water at the moment. Shaw School making the best of things in lane 7 at the moment, but certainly in contention. St Ignatius, St Joseph's and Kings as well. Newington just a little bit back in lane 3.
interesting too, Mike. I think there's been less than 0.8 of a second between Ignatius and Shaw in the third, second, and now the first year 10-8 at the 1,000-metre mark, which is evidence of how well those programs are both operating and the depth that they enjoy. But this could be the beginning of some ding-dong battles over the course of the full season. And just as a rule of thumb for those that are looking at some of the margins through the 5 or the 1,000 or 1,500 metre mark, an 8 generally takes about 3 seconds to cover a length. So if you see the margin of 1 second, that's about a third of a length, 2 seconds, 2/3 of a length, and so forth. So good rule of thumb there as you look at the margins as we move through the 1,500 metre mark, with a slight blip in the measurement frame there, but Riverview evidently in front, with coming through that 1,500 in 4:44, so three splits of 1:35 or thereabout.
And isn't this what we love to see so early on in the season? A fantastic battle unfolding out there on the water. Shaw in lane 7, St Ignatius in lane 6, Joey's in lane 5, King's in lane 4, and Newington in lane 3. So those first 4 crews on terms with each other. The Shaw School, well, they were in the lead at the 1,500 metres. I'd suggest that St Ignatius are the ones who've leapfrogged them, and they are lifting their rate of striking. Can Shaw respond to this push from the boys from Hunters Hill? And it is, yes, it is St Ignatius who are in the lead, and they have increased their rate of striking. I wonder whether it's just a bit too late now for the Shaw School to respond, but here comes Kings over in lane 4, who are really testing Joey's now to push up for that 3rd place. I think it is going to be a win for St Ignatius. Shaw are looking really good in 2nd place at the moment, but that 3rd place is still up for grabs between Joey's and Kings in lanes 4 and 3. It is going to be Kings, I think. It'll be a win for St Ignatius. 2nd place to Shaw, 3rd place to Kings. And St Joseph's will have to settle for 4th place. That was a fantastic battle in the closing stages of that race between those top 4 crews, and Newington in lane 3 just rounding out the field. But fantastic to see so much overlap between each of those 4 crews, Marty.
Oh, 100%. I think just a little over 3.5 seconds between 1st to 4th, and again another very strong finish from the King's crew, as we saw in the 2nd Junior 8 to come through St Joseph's College there and pinch 2nd, but a little like the 2nd Junior 8, the Riverview Year 10 first 8 were able to step up in that last 250 metres and put some distance between them and the Shaw School. So a pretty strong pattern suggesting there's a good endurance base at Ignatius, and some quality rowing prevailing in the testing final moments of each of those last 2 races. But a pretty quick time, all up in 6:20. I like to think that over the course of the year in these sort of conditions, again, you get down to sort of 6:08. And that's about 4 boat lengths. So come ahead of the river time, you'd think a crew like Ignatius in these conditions might be, 3 seconds quicker per 500 as they move towards the penultimate end of the season. But a very slick opening for the Year 10 first 8. The coaches would be pretty happy to see the boys under 6:20, and a lot to like about the closest of the competition up the top end there. Yeah,
absolutely. So recapping the results for the Year 10 first 8, first race of this morning's program. A win for St Ignatius, 2nd place to the Shaw School, 3rd place to the King's School, 4th place to St Joseph's, and 5th place to Newington. And you'll have just seen race 5 is underway. If you're joining us on the live stream or out here at the Regatta Centre for the 2025 Newington College Regatta, the School 3rd 8, race 5 is underway, and it is fantastic to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crews getting their seasons underway. In lane 3 is a crew from St Ignatius. We've got 2 crews from St Ignatius in this race. So, but in lane 3 is Nicholas Van Kerwick, Mykola Schmakuka, Ducha Waldron, Kobe Ellis, Oliver O'Carroll, Noah Beardmore, Charlie Forshaw, Henry Jewell, and Marshall Devlin is their cox. In lane 4 is the first of 2 crews from St Joseph's. That's Liam Sheehy, Fiedland Finnegan, Oliver Hunter, Fraser Roach, Ashton Rowe, Callum Patton, Digby Cullen, Hugh Jacobs, Patrick Scott, their coxswain. In lane 5 from the Shaw School is Charlie Cooper, Harry Tyrrell, Gus Pritchard, Sam Advani, Alec Eldershaw, Elliot Gordon, Max Riddle, Dominic Walker and Henry Johnson, their cox. In lane 6 from St Ignatius, the second crew, is Tommy Burton, Alexander Raymond Nash, Raf Tui, Max Remius, Alexander Briscoe, Jack Whitson, Patrick Cleary, Andrew Bigg is their stroke, and coxed by Sam Vecchio. In lane 7 from St Joseph's, the second crew, is Henry O'Malley, Will Brown, Lachlan Coman, Lachlan Farrell, Oliver France, Finn Garland, William Bailey, Lucas Manning and Georgia Young is their coxswain. And finally, Scott's opening the account for this morning. In lane 8, they're represented by Sam Marott, Will Netting, Teddy Alvarez Garcia, David Bai, Hugh Anderson, Jason Jang, Nick Phillips, Hugo Duplessis, and they're coxed by Jack Shannon.
Yeah, terrific to see Scott's represented in the schoolboy third 8. Again, this is another terrific example of the depth of the program, to see both St Ignatius and St Joseph's boating 2 crews in this race. Usually speaks volumes for the sort of performances we might expect in the GPS races, being the schoolboy, or the championship races of the GBS being the 4s and the 8s. Reminds me a little bit, Mike, of a saying I once heard from one of the Shaw coaches back in the heyday, which was the best way to win the schoolboy third 4 race at the head of the river is to win the schoolboy fourth 4. And you certainly will see some big bodies here in the school third 8 who may make their transition up into the 4s over the course of the season. And one thing we know for sure is that the individuals who are rowing often develop at quite different rates, both technically and mentally and physically. And 4 selection in particular is prone to quite significant fluctuations over the course of the season as different boys sort of reach their peak at different times, or those that are relatively new to the sport continue to show the sort of development that warrants selection.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll certainly see the 4s come down the course in just a few short events' time, but which is probably a more finely balanced exercise compared to the 8s. But one thing we haven't talked about so much this morning, Marty, is the extent to which these races are also representing for these boys the internal competition that exists, that is inherent in each of these programs as well, to have themselves progress up through the ranks through the third 8s into the 4s, and then into the second and first 8s as well in that order of ranking. And so the coaches will be keeping a close eye on each of these crews. The coaches from the directors of rowing all the way down through the coaching ranks, to see how these guys perform under pressure, and because many of these guys will have aspirations to move up through the ranks as the season progresses, or with an eye to the next season as well. And that's one of the great things I think about schoolboy rowing is just that ability for progression, and it really rewards ambition and perseverance, which is fantastic qualities.
Yeah, well said, Mike. I think each of the schools will have a season-long plan with some testing periods where they make specific selection choices and changes in the crews. But as you rightly point out, the first regatta of the season, and often these regattas that are raced up here at Cirque, where the conditions are sort of fair and even, and you're on the body of water that you race ahead of the river at, become an interesting test of not just kind of combinations within each crew, but whether or not there might be some opportunity to improve boat speed with some selection choices from outside of the individual crews. So yeah, I think the first race of the season is a great test for the boys, who get to see whether their hard work's paid off, and what sort of optimism they can take through to the rest of the season. But as you say, the coaches and the heads of rowing will also be closely looking at the performances of the team. And they'll usually earmark a small number of high-profile regattas like New South Wales State Championships, or some in Term 1 as target races where you're effectively looking to emulate the head of the river race plan and put it all out there.
Yeah. Well, for the moment in this race 5, it is St Ignatius who were in the ascendancy through the 1500 metres. That's the St Ignatius 1 crew in lane 6. They were followed through by St Joseph's 1 in lane 7, the Shore School in lane 5, St Ignatius 2 in lane 3, St Joseph's 2 in lane 4, and Scots in that order. But certainly at the top of this race, it is St Ignatius in lane 7, in lane 6, I should say. And yeah, they're not going to be challenged for this win in the School 38. And it's a relatively casual rate of striking out. It's a really tight-looking crew, so congratulations to St Ignatius. And a bit of a tighter affair between St Joseph's and Shaw for second place. St Joseph's in lane 7, they're just going to pip Shaw, who are in lane 5, and they'll settle for third.
Good row from Joey's.
Yeah. They should be really happy with that. And it is the second St Ignatius crew in lane 3 who round out 4th.
Interesting too, the winning time there for St Ignatius, 6:39, more or less the same time as their second Junior 8 Year 10-8 rows. So I'm sure Dan Noonan and the team might look for some internal competition between the third 8 and the Junior 8s over the course of the year.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's yeah, that's right. Some coaching headaches for sure coming out of some of these results. St Joseph's now rounding out 5th place in lane 4, and finally Scots in lane 6. Congratulations to each of the third 8s out there this morning. Recapping the results: a win for St Ignatius, 2nd place to St Joseph's, 3rd place to Shaw, 4th place to St Ignatius, 5th place to St Joseph's, and 6th place to Scots. All right, well, we move along in the program to race 6, and we're into the 4s, which is exciting. The 4th 4 is on the course. Let's read through these crews before we have a bit of a discussion about 4 rowing compared to 8-oar rowing. So in lane 1 is St Ignatius, represented by Archie Coble, William Brown, Archer Love, Angus Field, Thomas Brenham is their coxswain, and they're coached by Sarah Dew. In lane 2 is the Shore School, Hugh Riley, Harry Fuses, Campbell Binney, Peter Komniakis, Seb Cheers is their cox, and they're coached by Gary Ugang. In lane 3, St Joseph's is Henry O'Malley, Finn Garland, Oliver France, Lucas Marning, and their coxswain is George Young. In lane 4 is Sydney Grammar, who open their account for the 25-26 season, and they're represented by Raphael McNeil Chapman, Oliver Keller, Jaden Arav, Matthew Sanderson. Coxswain is Zach Lusthouse, and their coach is John Russell. In lane 5 is St Joseph's, represented by Marco Farnese, Samuel Lonergan, Fletcher Stevens, Thomas Smythe, and their cox Cooper Watkins. Scots are in lane 6, represented by Marcus Lamb, Eric Johansson, Hamish Marr, Tennyson Booze, and Lewin Galvin Bassanoro is their coxswain. In lane 7 is Shaw, represented by Michael Hocking, Sam Haley, Benjamin Pina, Jack Butcher, and Thomas Mann, their cox. In lane 8 is Kings, represented by Wiley Lay, Devon Majevaya, Cameron Gordon, and Ashley Mason. Their coxswain is Paul Klinkay. And finally, a second crew from the King's School, represented by Archie Farah, Will Ralph, Lachlan Cable, Henry Pegan, and Arjun Trivedi, the coxswain, and their coach is Felix Lay. And so the 4s are approaching the 1500 metres, and 4 rowing is certainly a different effort to rowing 8s, in the sense that you've got half the number of athletes, but you've got a coxswain as well, which is another weight in the boat that's not necessarily displacing the weight and not necessarily moving the boat forward, but certainly keeping the boats trim and keeping the crew focused between the boys. But compared to an 8, which there's some margin for I guess there's more of a margin for error to the extent there's more happening in the boat. Fours are a bit less forgiving, Marty, because you've got only one of four, you're holding one of four propulsion devices in the boat, and if there's a dirty stroke or if you clip the top of the water, quite profound effect on the balance.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing to note too around the four is it's a slower moving boat, so it feels a little heavier through the water. There's often a premium on really good power to weight, given you are hauling a 55 kilo coxswain down the course. You'll notice too that a lot of the coxswains are lying down on their backs in the bow, commonly termed a front end loader. One of the benefits of that is it allows the coxswain's body weight to sit beneath the centre of gravity of the boat, which is usually around the navel. And so there's a benefit obviously in balance in that, but you're quite right, there's a premium on timing and combination, and those crews that can row consistently and in particular time, the fundamentals of entry and exit tend to have a better balanced boat, a more stable platform, and we're certainly seeing that in lane one there with the Riverview crew, rowing flat, strong, finishing each stroke off beautifully, and they look quite comfortable there as they make their way towards the finish line.
Yeah, really, they'd be really pleased with that. St Ignatius, they are going to claim the first four win of the season in the fourth four. The win for St Ignatius in lane one. Second place, looking as though it'll go the way of the Shore School. A couple of missed strokes or something going on there, but nonetheless, they claim second place. Third place will go to St Joseph's in lane 5.
And Kings finishing quickly over here on lane 9. Good, again, good strong finish from Kings to come through in fourth.
Fifth place to the Shore School in lane 7. Hocking, Haley, Pina, Butcher and Mann. We've got a couple crews yet to finish. So we've got Scots in lane 6. And they're just testing themselves out at quite a high rate of striking in the final stages of this race.
Then maybe another blended Kings and Riverview crew, if I'm not mistaken there, Mike, in lane 8.
And this Kings crew in lane 8 will finalise this field by the looks of things. So recapping the results, a win for St Ignatius in lane 1, second place to Shore in lane 2, third place to St Joseph's in lane 5, fourth place to Kings in lane 9, fifth place to Shore in lane 7, sixth place to Scots in lane 6, and seventh place to Kings in lane 8.
Just on the timing front there, 7:06, very, very slick for the schoolboy fourth four again at this time of year. The conditions do look favourable. It's a slight cross tail breeze, so arguably a little flatter in lanes 1 and 2 on the far side of the course, away from the grandstand. But that light tail breeze is the optimal conditions for moving quick. Yeah. It's not choppy, so that the blade work is disrupted or hampered, but you get all the benefit of some of the assistance that comes around boat run and speed in the tail breeze. Yeah,
and it's worth pointing out that in the main, this competition lake at this regatta centre is an extremely fair and even course. That's certainly not the case if you, in the context of the other artificially developed rowing courses in this country, where it's not fair across the lanes. There's a higher degree of advantage in one lane compared to another, I should say.
Or even the Parramatta River, where we used to race, which is tidal, and you have water moving more quickly near the headlands as the tides go out, for example. But very fair conditions throughout, and again that time of 7:06 for the schoolboy fourth four is really, really competitive, and typically in the fours you're looking for a time of under 7 minutes to be on the podium in each of the first, second, third and fourth four. And depending on the competitive dynamics, it's not uncommon for the second four to be quicker than the first four at different times, or there'll be some anomalies around timing depending on race conditions and combinations. But under 7 minutes is the magic target for most of these boys who'll be racing here in the fours.
So through the 1500, it was the Shaw School with a very slight advantage over St. Ignatius, who are running second at the moment, 0.39 the margin. But a pretty significant gap between those top two crews and the rest of the boats on the water at the moment.
It's an interesting point too, Mike. I think for the spectators, it might look like a big margin, and it certainly is in the sort of third four as we see it here today. But over the course of the summer and the season, there's always compression between the field, and not everyone starts from the same beginning point. Obviously, these stronger programs like Kings and Riverview and certainly Shore typically do get off to a little bit of a flyer, but yeah, there's no cause for concern in that second bunch or category. It's really a question of trajectory and the sort of work that gets done in both term 4, often through the holidays, and then in earnest from camp at the beginning of term 1. That's the driver of collapsing that margin.
That's right, and as these combinations develop throughout the season as well, there's so much of it, as you said, Marty, a premium on timing and cleanliness in the fours, and so certainly that'll be an objective for the coaches throughout the season. But for the moment, it is the Shaw School in lane 5, who are still in the lead ahead of St. Ignatius over there in lane 2, and that's a really clean-looking row from the guys from the Shaw School. Yeah, they're keeping their body, they're upright, their timing is good, they're not overextending themselves through the shoulders. A really clean row from the Shaw School. They'll be really pleased with that. St. Ignatius settled for second place, and a bit of a competition unfolding between Kings over here in lane 8 and St. Joseph's over there in lane 3. And I think Kings have the advantage, but it's only slight. Good to see the Kings boys testing themselves at the higher rates and going through the gears. Third place to Kings, fourth place to St. Joseph's in lane 3.
Great battle here.
Oh, I wouldn't call that. I think it's going to be... we'll leave that one to the judges.
Yeah.
That's between Scots in lane 4 and Newington in lane 6.
That's very delicate of you to suggest the judges should call that, Mike. I think some natural bias might come through from me if I was making a call. But good, strong finish, and good to see Newington and Scots really pushing one another right to the line there. Another terrific time of 7:01 for the schoolboy third 4, and interesting to note too, Gary Ubergang coaching Shaw's third and fourth 4, who back in the mid 80s when I was finishing school, Gary was a very successful coach of the Shaw first 8, and what a great privilege for Glenn Bates and the full team at Shaw to have someone of Gary's experience and success still actively involved in the program. From memory, I suspect I've heard him retire at least twice. So good to see that rowing people don't leave the sport; they just bounce back at a different point in time.
That's right. Certainly one of the stalwarts of rowing in Australia. We're just having a look here at the Sydney Grammar Crew by looks of things. Yes, this is the one of the crews in race 7 for the third 4. This is Maximilian McKnight, Jarrett Kwan, Marcus Shipway, Ryan, Teresa and Dashil Huang. So congratulations to Sydney Grammar. All right, well, we'll move along to race 8, which is the second 4 on the course and bearing down upon us. In lane 2 is Shaw, represented by Matthew Giuretta, Xavier Duvernay, Braden McDonald, Taj Robertson and Alex Goulburn. In lane 3, St. Ignatius, Kieran Dennis, Oliver Tucker, Ignatius Babbage Hockey, Luke Delaney and Zach Burton. In lane 4 is St. Joseph's, represented by Fletcher Grenfell, Thomas Eve, George Graham and Julius Lamb, coxed by Zachary Taylor. In lane 5 is Kings, Denver Purden, Charlie Jones, Nicholas Walsh, Sam Watt, Oliver Forrester. Is their cox and coached by Angus Wickham. In lane 6 is Newington, represented by Aidan Evans, Joshua Cronin, Silas Allen, Ashton Tullipin, and coxed by Dylan Henry, coached by Thomas McLean. In lane 7 is Scots, represented by Charles White, Charles Carmody, Hamish Wiseman, Kevin Kim, Their coxswain is Artie Chan. And finally, representing Sydney Grammar in lane 8 is Charles Castaldi, George Wilson, Samuel Lai, Alexander Randall, and TJ Abdul Syed is their coxswain, and their coach is John Russell.
Mike, it looks like the conditions might have swung a little bit, which is again often the case. Just looking at the flags there by the finishing podium, perhaps a slight headwind now coming from the rower's sort of back right-hand shoulder. So that will favour the crews over in lane 0, 1 and 2, where the water might be a little bit flatter. But yeah, interesting that the conditions have shifted a little bit and perhaps no longer optimal, racing or speed conditions, but a slight cross headwind.
But cross headwind certainly not bothering the crew from the Shore School. It is the Shore School over there in lane 2. For making the best of things, Matthew Gioretta, Xavier Duvernay, Braden McDonald and Taj Robertson, coxed by Alex Golban. And they are looking to open their season with a win in the second 4. And just testing themselves through the gears as they claim the win. Congratulations, Shaw. Second place going the way of St. Ignatius. Kieran Dennis, Oliver Tucker, Ignatius Babbage Hockey, Luke Delaney and Zach Burton.
Good row from Riverview, understroking Shaw. And I wonder too whether they might be priming for the second race of today and treating this more like a heat of sorts as the first sort of blowout of the season, and then step it up a little bit in the finals. So that'll be definitely worth watching. Yeah,
the structure of this regatta is really conducive to getting runs on the board and a bit of a blowout, a bit of a training run, a race rehearsal for perhaps for some higher intensity work in the second race. Third place to St. Joseph's, fourth place to Kings. We've just seen Newington claim 5th and Scots in 6th, though. Crews going through in lane order actually through the finish line.
Yeah,
and Sydney Grammar yet to finish over here in lane 8.
And, not to obsess about the times, but 7:04 for Shaw there in the schoolboys' second 4, slightly slower than the third floor, but perhaps reflective of that shifting conditions we touched on a little earlier. And we're underway now in the schoolboy first 4 race. The leading crews just starting to approach the 500 metre mark. And in the middle of the river, it's a smooth striking St. Ignatius College leading Shaw about half length back to Kings, third length back to Scots and Newington, then Clearwater to Sydney Grammar. So through 500 metres, we've got in lane 1 on the far side of the course, Angus Falk, Vincent McAllister, Finn Clare, Oliver Gainsford and Darcy Wills in the cox seat. Representing Shaw, we've got Christopher Ewan, Rupert Forrester, Ryan Doherty, Ed McDonald and Eddie Brooks coxing. For Kings in lane 3, we've got Patrick Yee in bow, Henry Harvey 2, Max McGaw, Harry Irving, Keshan Yarasarara and Angus Wickham, the coach. Good to see Angus with the megaphone in hand. In lane 4, Henry McRae, Oliver Eisenhower, Benjamin Eisenhower, Thomas Tancred and James Stack coxing for Newington. In lane 5, Jeremy Cooper, Rory Begg, Rocco McConnell, Nicholas Softis and Hugo Longren coxing. And lane 6 for representing Sydney Grammar, we've got Atticus Lee, Jackson Woolham, Zach Wee, Will Armstrong and Dylan Ruddock. For Scots in lane 7, Thomas Tyson, Max Algie, Ben Books and Jasper Tousell with Joe Maloof coxing. And in lane 8, City Boys High, represented by Leo Hang, James Carmichael, Vincent Wang, Michael Trung and Jetsam Lim in the cox seat. And the rain looks like it's lifted in intensity as the schoolboy first fours approach the 1,000 metre mark. It's Riverview again, smooth striking with a half a length lead over Shaw, about a 0.95 of second the margin. Kings back in 3rd place, Scots 4th, have edged slightly ahead of Newington in 5th. And we'll have, I think, Sydney Grammar coming through the 1,000 metre mark momentarily. There they are. So 3:26, a pretty good split in the schoolboy first 4 as St Ignatius make their way into the 3rd 500 with the rain beating down and certainly the conditions starting to sort of swirl a little bit. So seemingly a slight tail again. But it should be a good battle here between Shaw and Ignatius as they make their way through towards the final 500. So as the first fours approach the 500 metres to go point, it's rocks or diamonds up here at Penrith, isn't it, Mike? It's either 35 degrees and humid, or it's pouring with rain. But Shaw coming through the third 500, I should say, in first place, about a boat length clear now of St Ignatius College. So a big push from Shaw on the far side of the course in that testing third 500. Kings now in third, a clear third, but about half a boat length ahead of Scots, and Newington almost overlapping with Scots in fifth. So the crew's starting to separate themselves a little bit there in the third 500.
Yeah, the numbers coming through the 1,500 metre timing point, Marty, just demonstrating this is quite a spread out race. Just with some of those seconds opening up between each of those crews, 2-7-1-2, the margins between some of those the top 5 crews, and Shaw making the best of it so far. And as we just touched on earlier, perhaps this is a race where you'll see some rehearsal tactics being deployed by these crews, of course preparing themselves for the second race of this morning's programs, but also for the rest of the season. And as the rain bears it down upon us out here at the Regatta Centre, it's not actually going to bother these crews out there. It'll flatten out the water and make things nice and trim. So certainly while the spectators might not be enjoying the weather so much, boys out on the course not going to mind it at all.
And I think Riverview really upped the strike rate to 34 and a half strokes a minute, and it's certainly applying pressure on Shaw, who were sitting on 31 quite comfortably at the 1750 metre mark. And Shaw will go on to win the schoolboy first 4 by just under a boat length from a faster finishing Riverview. Slightly different rate pattern and race strategy to the second 4. But a great result for both crews, and good to see them in close proximity. Kings coming through in third with a really good finish again from Scots, who I think have raced a terrific last 1,000 metres, about a boat length clear of Newington in fifth. and a couple of crews left to come up the tail end of the last 250 metres or so, being Sydney Grammar, who are also lifting well towards the finish line. And I think Sydney Boys High for the first time represented over here in the outer lane, being lane 8.
Yeah, great to see Sydney Boys High School opening their 25-26 season as well, as Sydney Grammar crosses the line in 6th position. And yeah, that wind has turned again, Marty. Looks as though we have a pretty strong tail now. This Sydney High crew being blustered across the line there, but it'll make for some fairly slick times, you would think, in the second and first eights, which we are about to get underway with, as Sydney Boys High School round out the first fours.
Yeah, good to see High up here and contesting early in the year too. And the second eights are underway. This will should be a terrific race. And as you mentioned, Mike, I think the gusts have shifted once again and are definitely blowing down the course. The course tends to run pretty much east-west. So, you know, we're seeing an easterly now starting to prevail out here at Cirque, and looks like in the schoolboy second eights, it's the Shore School. They're off to a flying start and seemingly having a commanding lead as they approach the 1,000-metre mark.
Yeah, that's right. That's certainly the way it looks at the moment. The Shore School, of course, defending their title in 25-26 in the second eight. That's the Shore School. They're represented by Alex Rogan, Ollie Mott, Lachlan McIntosh, Austin Hamilton, Ollie Kosh, Charlie Glancy, Alistair Curry, Liam Kennedy and Will Gandy, their coxswain. And they have gone through the 1,000 metres in the lead, and it's a handy one of that. Some 5 seconds back to Newington, St Ignatius and Kings. Well, that I'd be really, really stoked with that if I was a coach in the shore rowing program at this stage, to get out to that, to a lead that flattering in the first 1,000 metres of the season. Of course,
they'll be licking their lips to Mike at the split time at 2:55. So a winning time for the schoolboys second eight in optimal conditions is a sub 6 minutes these days, which is quite remarkable, given that's often the magic time and proof of genuine boat speed at the first eight level, certainly in flat conditions. But 6 minutes or thereabouts, plus or minus a little bit, is really the target time for the second eight coaches. And this Shore school, you know, is kind of racing a little bit on brand. You know, Shore as a school generally like to get out quickly, get in control of the race very hard to the 1,500 metre, and then just carry themselves home from there. And it's not often you see schoolboy crews overhauled, you know, from strong leading positions. It's a very motivating place to row from, and seeing the whole field before you is a terrific way to control the race. Yeah,
absolutely, Marty, and that's all spot on. And as you say, like the early advantage in an eighth race is so key. I mean, to overturn a lead, certainly one this significant, in any 8-oared race is a substantial and extraordinary occurrence. It's not quite as similar in the 4 races, which are lighter boats, and the boat speeds can change quicker. But certainly to change the speed in an 8 at this kind of pointy end of the rankings and seniority in the crews is really extraordinary. So suffice to say, the Shore School will be really pleased with where they currently sit in this second 8 race, as the wind really whistles out here at the Regatta Centre. And those conditions have really just turned, and starting to see almost a little bit of white caps out there on the water, Marty. But
Sure, they're ticking on at 34.5 strokes to the minute. They've gone through the 1,500 in 4:56. So I think we will be talking about a sub 6 minute 2,000 metres for Shore, who are tapping along really nicely. You can tell the crew's got a thirst for the finish line, and there's no backing off from Shore as they look to post that time. It's been a very, very convincing performance. They've kept clear water throughout the entire race, and interestingly, Riverview haven't been able to hang on, but are now taking a little bit of pressure on both sides of the course from Kings, who have seen finish very strongly in the junior 8s or the year 10 8s earlier, and a terrific battle going on between Newington College, our host today, and St Joseph's College on this side of the river for what might be third place. Seemingly, Newington might be just in front as Riverview cross the finish line in second. Newington are just going to pit St Joseph's College and then Riverview, the King's School, I should say, and then it'll be back to Scott's and Sydney Grammar. So terrific racing there, and 5:58.67. That's one for the ages.
Well, that's not a bad way to open your season, Marty, with a cracking time like that. Congratulations to the Shaw School. Of course, they were commanding leaders of that race from start to finish, and took it out with a 5:58, a blistering time. So that's one to make the first 8 athletes sit up and take notice. Sydney Grammar coming in 7th place out of lane 1, and Sydney Boys High School in lane 6 in 8th place.
Interesting too, there, Mike, that often the way a crew races early on in the season kind of sets an identity for how they might look to race optimally going forward. And you look at a performance like Shaw's second 8 there, it wouldn't surprise me to see them owning that fast start, seeking to enjoy the benefit of a look back on the field as the season progresses. And that's a very confidence-building performance. It gives a very, very strong foundation around which to build a plan for not just how you race, but how you might want the season to go. And similarly, the challenging crews would seek to disrupt that. If that's Shaw's pattern or model, the challenging crews would often look to be quite aggressive out of the blocks in and around ahead of the River Day to see whether the pattern can be disrupted from Shaw. So there's some sort of opportunities for both the challengers and the leading crews to really think about how they need to perform in order to take control of the race come March 21st next year.
Yeah, absolutely, Marty. And you touched on a bit of the mental side of rowing and competition rowing, and it's certainly in the context of a season of some 6 to 8 months that's going to unfold in front of us for the AAGPS season. It's a question of, can patterns that have been laid down early on be disrupted, and that traditional kind of mode of competition, crews like Shaw getting out to a fast start. Some of those crews, that deploy even split tactics, can really seek to get under the skin of some of these crews that are perhaps predictable in the way that they approach a race. So certainly plenty to keep interested about. But for the moment, we're going to turn our attention to the first day, which is very exciting. It's race 11 on the program, so we've just gotten underway, and the weather's changed again. I think we had a really strong tail there a moment ago, but the wind's changing direction again, blowing from the west towards the east down the course, making things a bit more difficult for these first 8s, and perhaps this time's a bit slower compared to the second 8s. So that'll be an interesting one to watch out for. But in any event, the crews are underway. We are represented, as you'd expect, by each of the schools. So we've got some time, so we'll just read out some names. So in lane 1 is the King's School, represented by Sam McLean, Gus Collins, Jack Hall, Lockie Tyndall, Hamish Matthews, Duke Millward, Lockie Rogers, Nicholas Platus is their stroke, and Otto Gerber, their coxswain. That's the Kings crew. And in lane 2 is Shaw, represented by Toby Crowther, George Scammell, Harry Faulkner, Sam Bowman, Henry Roxburgh, Ben McCutchinson, Luke Robinson, and Oliver Paris, coxed by Oscar Miller, coached by Jason Baker. Lane 3 is Sydney Boys High School, represented by Ethan Wilkinson, Lyndon Chow, Andrew Gu, Jun Shim, Gabriel San, Max McLeod, Roy Zhang, and Roman Samsonov, coxed by Thomas Zeng. In lane 4 is Sydney Grammar School, represented by Diamond Leonard, Harry Lai, Jeremy Court, Daniel Walsh, William Stumbles, Samuel Lai, Joe Lanigan, and David Walsh. And their cox is Ian Beera, and they're coached by Stephen Stewart and John Kenny. St Ignatius, the defending champions, are in lane 5, and they're represented by Noah Coble, Jack Hare, Thomas Roche, William Bryant, Banjo Metcalf, Hamish Walker, Hugo Brown, Julian Carr, coxed by Ryan McNulty. Lane 6 is the Scots College, represented by Max Crawford, Mark Littlemore, Noah Perry, Thomas Beck, Henry Marion, Jack Tabor, Dean Lowe, Max Burklow and Charlie Cameron, coached by Judith Mungamak. In lane 7 is Joey's, represented by Henry Campbell, Kai Nevitt, Raphael Cousins, Christian Tripoloni, Tom Curran, I should say, Fred O'Hara, Louis Benuska, Joseph Lane and Jonathan Yates. And finally Newington, our hosts, in lane 8, represented by Will Gillespie Penny, Nico Colantonio, Nicholas Trethui, Lewin Whitaker, Charles Alls, Hugh Jones, Lucas van der Westhuizen and Tristan McDonald, coached by Hugo Baker.
And a terrific battle between two schools who've battled very, very consistently and well all day today, being Shaw and Riverview through the 1,000-metre mark. Again, times a little slower as that headwind you called a little earlier, Mike, kicks in. But at this stage, it's Riverview with 0.07 of a second lead over Shaw, so a particularly tight contest. A couple of lanes separating those two crews, so we should see how they attack the third 500. It's probably fair to say traditionally Riverview have been very, very strong at the back end of the race. Shaw perhaps more renowned for their front end of the race performing, but I think the Shaw crew might be stalking St Ignatius like a shark through this third 500 metres, and it'll be very interesting to see how those two crews progress over the course of the remaining 750 or so. Yeah, that's right, Marty, and the crews coming through that you can just see they've just passed through the 1250. An interesting statistic for you is that Kings and Shaw out on the course today are comprised of all Year 12s. So some really experience coming through from both of those crews you'd expect, and Shaw certainly looking the goods on the screen there if you're joining us on the live stream. See Shaw striking at 34 strokes to the minute, and they are seemingly making a good push against Riverview. It might have just pushed to about a canvas lead. So Riverview on 34.5 strokes to the minute, so fairly equivalent strike rates. We see Joey's there in third, Kings on the far side in fourth, Newington in fifth, and that's through 1500 with Sydney Grammar in sixth, Scots College in seventh. So good battle. Yeah, absolutely, and we saw it, of course, at the Major Rennie race last year. It was Ignatius followed by Shaw and then Kings. So St Joseph's currently peeking their heads into the top 3, but let's see how we go into the final stage of this race. Both crews stepping it up. Shaw have lifted to 35. Riverview relatively steady at 34.5. So again, looks like the conditions might have just settled down a little bit, so it should be a fairly even contest, or at least flat water, to allow the teams to actually demonstrate what they're capable of in the remaining 200 metres or so. Well, Shaw will be really pleased with this advantage ahead of St Ignatius with 250 metres to row. Yep, in a new M-Packer, as I understand it, and we're seeing a lot of the crews, both Riverview, Joey's, Newington, getting behind the German manufacturer that's very popular at World Championships and Olympic level. And here comes Shaw, certainly laying it all down, and clear leaders now in the last 15 strokes or so for both crews. They'll go on to win the schoolboy first 8 by 3/4 of a length from Riverview in lane 5. Another 3 lengths back to a fast finishing Kings, perhaps. No, Joey's will finish in third as they sneak a canvas ahead of Kings, and then a further 2 lengths back to Newington College in lane 8, and a length and a half then to Sydney Grammar School in lane 4, finishing strongly. Scots College in lane 6, and then Sydney Boys High still working their way through the final 500, but looking very cohesive. Good racing again there, Mike, as Sydney High complete the 2,000 metres. Any thoughts on the dynamics there in the much enjoyed schoolboy first 8? Well, as you say, Marty, a fascinating race, and the
ascendancy enjoyed by the Ignatius crew, able to be disrupted in the end by the Shaw School, and as we talked about before, that just sets the tone for the season and it starts the mental games. It's, I guess, the mental battle starts now for the rest of the season, as the way that those crews approach their races becomes obvious. Of course, don't want to lay all their cards on the table so early. 6:22, the unofficial time done by Shaw there over the line, but certainly St Ignatius, I think there's an extent to which they'll be unsettled by that result, but certainly all to play for the second race of this morning. But as we go through the season, yeah, I mean, that sets the tone for each of these crews, and congratulations to the Shaw School. Really gutsy performance to come through, as we said. Hard thing to do in an 8 order race, to come through a lead that is established early, so well done to the Shaw School.
Yeah, definitely good result for them, and vindicates a lot of sacrifice that's typically been made through the winter months. Again, heartening performance for sure. And to be fair, I think Ignatius has done a terrific job of playing the long game for a long period of time. Their program has a wonderful crescendo towards Head of the River Day. I think the team more broadly are very adept at making sure the season long program and the periodisation that sits within that is well managed, and it's always easy to overread a lot into the early part of the season, these early races, but it's also a very real feedback loop for all the boys, and there'll be some interesting reflections and some emotion off the first race for the coaches to debrief, but a terrific opportunity with a second set of races for these senior crews to then go out and perhaps make some adjustments and try and do a better job of executing the plan, or perhaps evolving the plan based on what they might have learned about themselves in that first run of competition. And
you certainly saw some relief, and you mentioned the word vindication before then, Marty, and certainly so much emotion and, as you say, sacrifice tied up in each of these campaigns, and it's really a weight off the chest for these guys to have had their first hit out for the season, and of course plenty more action to come today. But for the moment, we're going to take a break. That's the first phase of this morning's program's done. We'll be back at 10:10 for the fourth 8, and we'll do it all again.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mike.
Well, good morning again and welcome back to the 2025 Newington College Regatta. We're about to get underway with the second phase of this morning's proceedings. We'll run all of those events that we had earlier on again, as we discussed up here in the tower. Really good opportunity for these guys to get out and have a couple of runs on the board for the first regatta of the season. Thank you to Marty Nicholas for his contribution this morning and his insights. We're about to get underway with race 12, the school year 10 fourth 8. Of course, earlier on this morning we saw this this race won by St. Ignatius. Second place to Shaw and Kings in third, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not those times and those crews can maintain their placings in this race, or whether we've seen the upsets on the water this morning. It's about an hour left in this morning's program. It's a fairly tidy and short program. 11:20 will be the school first 8, and that will conclude this morning's program. So grateful to have your company for the second phase of this morning's program. And his start. Got to start in the fourth 8, the year 10 fourth 8. You can see on the screen there the boys in the colours of the Shaw School in lane 7. So just to run through the names again. In lane 4 is St. Joseph's. That's Liam, scratching, from St. Joseph's in lane 4. But in lane 5, on the left-hand side of the screen there is Harry Mann, Sudip Betchwell, Benjamin Deal, Joe Russell, Frankie Love, Darcy Bragg, Ilan Elvey, Bill McLean and Cooper Morgan, their cocks. Lane 6 is St. Ignatius, represented by Hugo Harper, Sydney McCosker, Tom Cuschieri, Theodore Hennessy, Kaylin Strudwick, John Malone, Angus Lund, Jacob Collins and Teddy Hardy, their cocks, coached by Timothy Seekle. And the Shaw School, who we saw on screen just a moment ago in lane 7, represented by Ian Yip, Jude Jansen, Nathan Borgona, Louis Kordek, Christian Chalinsky, Oliver Thompson, Graham Pennefather, Daniel Chapman, and Thomas Mann, their cocks. So as I mentioned before, we saw St. Ignatius take out this race earlier on this morning, and, well, by looks of things at the moment, they are repeating a strong performance out there in the blue and white colours. They've passed through the 500 metres in a clear first place. Bit of a tighter affair between Kings and Shaw for that second and silver medal position. And a reminder to each of the crews from the third year 10-8 onwards that will be presenting medals for the regatta, so please do make your way over to the medal presentation pontoon after your race. For the moment, it is St. Ignatius looking the goods in the school year 10 fourth 8 for the second time this morning. St Ignatius opening up a really significant lead now ahead of Shaw School and Kings. It's a Shaw School who've just seized that second place with a little bit more solidity ahead of Kings, who've just dropped back a little bit. And this race spreading out a little bit. Of course, these each of these programs to be commended for the depth in their programs. Year 10, 4th, 8 on the course at the moment. St Ignatius College in lane 6 putting on a clinic this morning in the school year 10 4th 8. Of course, earlier this morning we saw them take out this same event in a time of 7 minutes and 6 seconds. So a chance for the coach to have a close look at the technique and the form of these young athletes. As Marty and I mentioned earlier this morning, likely their first regatta in a sweep or boat. And they're just testing themselves through the gears now. St Ignatius in lane 6. Congratulations, Riverview. That's a really tidy performance. There's Hugo Harper, Sydney McCosker, Tom Kischieri, Theodore Hennessy, Kalen Strudwick, John Malone, Angus Lund, Jacob Collins, Teddy Hardy, and their coach, Timothy Seacole. Very well done to St Ignatius, who claimed the win for the second time today, and that'll set the tone for the rest of their season. The Shaw School in lane 7, well, they're looking poised to claim second place again. We're looking as though the order will be unchanged from this morning's race. Second to Shaw, that's Ian Yip, Jude Jensen, Nathan Borgona, Louis Kordek, Christian Chalinsky, Oliver Thompson, Graham Pennefather, Daniel Chapman and Thomas Mann, their coxswain. And Kings will claim third place. Harry Mann, Sudip Betoile, Benjamin Deal, Joe Russell, Frankie Love, Darcy Bragg, Elon Elvey, Bill McLean and Cooper Morgan. So congratulations to those three crews on a successful morning out here at the Regatta Centre and opening their accounts for the 25-26 AAGPS rowing season. Some high fives being exchanged in that Kings boat, always good to see. So race 13 underway. It's the year 10 third 8. We saw earlier this morning, a win for the Shaw School, second place to St Ignatius, third place to St Joseph's, and fourth place to Kings. Of course, each of those crews backing up for the for this race 13. We should have some numbers shortly as the crews approach the 1,000 metres. It's Kings in lane 4, Shaw in lane 5, Ignatius in lane 6, and St Joseph's in lane 7. Some fantastic footage on the live stream or on the big screen. If you're joining us out here at the Regatta Centre of the view from the boat race officials' vessel. Getting up nice and close to the action. And St Ignatius and Shaw, well, they're at loggerheads again in this race. Of course, Shaw claimed the win earlier on this morning, and St Ignatius have their bow balls in front this time round. So, plenty to play for those two crews. It's a bit of a race of two races contained within the one. St Ignatius and Shaw at the top end of the race. Only 1 second between them, and a bit of a distance then back to St Joseph's and Kings. And to suggest this competition's heating up a little bit between Shaw and Ignatius. You can just see Ignatius on the screen, and I'd suggest there's some overlap between those two boats, and we'll get a better idea as they come through the 1500 in a short moment. But Ignatius still with their bow ball in front of Shaw, and the question is whether Shaw can respond in the final 500 metres. Of course, they won earlier this morning when conditions were pretty fast. They won in a time of 6 minutes 45 seconds. And now Ignatius, well, they're the ones that putting some pressure on Shaw now. We've got their backs to the wall and some distance to make up if they're to claim back-to-back wins for the first two hit-outs of the season. Of course, demonstrating the exceptional depth that both of these programs have. Of course, the weather's calmed down a bit as well, so hopefully we see some fair conditions and some easier racing compared to the sideways rain which we had earlier on this morning. Of course, the heavens threatening to open once again, so hopefully we'll get through the next hour or so without a major incident on the weather front. But for the moment, a fascinating race developing between Scots and St Ignatius, Shaw I should say, and St Ignatius. Shaw I think have pressed back on Ignatius in that last 100 metres or so, and they're really now got Ignatius backs against the wall, and they're going stroke for stroke now. There's still 150 metres to row, so it's anyone's guess as to what happens. Who can hold their hand on the stove longest? Shaw are really responding now and lifting the rate of striking. I think Ignatius are still just ahead marginally, but they're coming past the grandstand. The crowds are getting involved, and it's a really, really high quality race in this Year 10 Third 8. This is fantastic. I think it's going to go right down to the line. I wouldn't want to call this between St Ignatius in lane 6, Shaw in lane 5. They're going stroke for stroke. They're right next to each other, and it's going to be St Ignatius by the narrowest of margins. Wasn't that a fantastic thing to see so early on in these Year 10 8s? I mean, that's just fantastic rowing from each of those crews, and really gutsy to keep their form right through to the end. Fantastic efforts by both of those crews, and their coxswains as well to keep them composed. Very well done. You can see on the replay how narrow the margin was in the end. Congratulations. Ignatius take the win. Shaw have to settle for second place. And, of course, they're going to want to correct that ledger as the season goes on. St Joseph's claims third place there in lane 7, and it will be Kings in fourth place. recapping the results in the second race of the Year 10 Third 8, race 13 on the program. A win for St Ignatius, unofficially in a time of 7 minutes 11 as the rain starts to pour down at the Regatta Centre. Second place to Shaw, third place to St Joseph's, and fourth place to Kings. So race 14 underway. It's the second 8. And as the rain really does start to pour down on the course, it's flattening the water out nicely for our oarsmen on the water at the moment. It was a win early this morning for St Ignatius, and that's the crew comprised of Frederick Dunn, Monty Hartman, Hunter Harris, Patrick Kane, Hugo Borman, Max Gordon Twaddle, Harrison Marshall, Nicholas Clock, and their cox, Liam Barnes. And they are the ones setting the standard again in this second race rehearsal. Shaw are currently some 7 seconds behind them, followed by Kings and St Joseph's, and that's the way they went through the 1,000-metre mark. And so perhaps with some greater distance between the boats in this race, there'll be some greater flexibility for the coxswains just to test their crews in terms of the rating. Can they maintain a lower rate of striking whilst maintaining their position relative to the other crews, and just practice a bit of calmness. Of course, these are all things that will come with experience as the Year 10 8s progress through this season and into the Senior 8s next year. It's a wonderful shot there of the St Joseph's crew in lane 5. And that's a really calm performance from the St Joseph's crew, just contending with some dirty water, but yeah, really good looking form there from the St Joseph's crew. But at the top end of this race, St Ignatius in lane 7. I think they may have extended their lead ahead of the Shaw School. Some 8.5 seconds back to Shaw, followed by Kings in that order. The Shaw School in this race, represented by Nathan Clante, Philip Ewan, Angus Edwards, Finn McIntosh, Toby Dalgleish, Cooper Sparks, Sam Kierce, Owen Barnes, and Owen King, their coxswain. I'd suggest that it's going to take a special effort to overcome the commanding lead established early on in this race by St Ignatius, and another testament to the depth enjoyed by that school program. They're just testing themselves through the gears, St Ignatius, as they come into the final 250 metres of this race and past the grandstand, and capping off a really successful morning for this Year 10 second 8 in the St Ignatius colours. Coached by Sam Carney. Well, Coach Carney will be very impressed with his crew this morning. The race is tightening up though between the Shaw School and the King's School for second place, and I think Shaw may have just pushed their bow balls in front of Kings for the moment. It's going to be a win for St Ignatius, but the second place and silver medal position is all in doubt at this stage. Kings are responding and they're going stroke for stroke, and we're known for another very, very tight finish between Kings and the Shaw School. It's nothing in it at all. I think Kings might have just got it. A very, very narrow victory, I'd suggest, but waiting official confirmation. A really great opportunity for those crews to test each other and push themselves right to the edge. You can see on the replay just how close that was. I think it was just on the boat surge the Kings still got it. And St Joseph's coming into fourth position to finalise the school Year 10 second 8, and each of those crews can be really stoked with their performance, and a special mention of course to Kings and the Shaw School contending for that silver medal position. So while we wait a presentation for the second 8, just an announcement that racing is going to be delayed by 20 minutes after this race that's currently on the course, the Year 10 first 8, just to account for the weather. And so referees and umpires request that all boats not take to the water for the next 20 minutes and await a further announcement with respect to the weather. I'll wait for the Year 10 first 8 to come down. Just congratulations again to St Ignatius for their win in the second 8, the Year 10 second 8. Congratulations to Frederick Dunn, Monty Hartman, Hunter Harris, Patrick Kane, Hugo Borman, Max Gordon Twaddle, Harrison Marshall, Nicholas Clock and Liam Barnes. Moving along to the first 8, which is the Year 10 first 8, I should say, which is on the course. Of course, this morning, earlier on, we saw the win claimed by St Ignatius. Second place to Shaw School, third place to Kings, fourth place to St Joseph's, and fifth place to Newington. And it's a delectable competition that's developing on the course at the moment. Through the 1,500 metres, it was St Ignatius, Shaw, Kings, and St Joseph's. And then Newington just passing for the 1,500 now in that order. So for the moment, the positioning's unchanged in this race. But certainly plenty of water yet to row for this Year 10 first 8 race. And St Ignatius, well, they're not going to want to take their collective foot off of the accelerator for the moment. They've got Shaw bearing down upon them, and the weather has just calmed down for us and the water is nice and flat, so plenty left to give for this Shaw School crew, I'd expect, of course, and similarly for the Kings crew, not far behind them at all, so plenty to play for the minor placings. St Joseph's, of course, in contention on the near side of the course in the cerise colours. St Ignatius, though, they are looking very good indeed, coached by Hamish MacDonald. This is Arthur Roche, Charles Holt, Charlie Shaheen, Hudson Shaw, Iggy Jenkins, Darcy O'Day, Xavier Dinan and Charlie O'Halloran. They are looking in the ascendancy and looking poised to claim the Year 10 first 8. But look at this, the competition evolving between Kings in lane 6 and Shaw in lane 4. It's going to be Kings who claim second. Shaw School settle for third place, and a really, really gutsy row there by St Joseph's just to push up on the top 3. They claim 4th place, and 5th place to Newington. So Kings improving their position in that race by 1. They push themselves up into 2nd place. And the Shaw School having to settle for 3rd place. So as I mentioned, racing will be delayed by about 20 minutes while we wait for a determination on the weather. But we'll bring you a further update as soon as it's available. Thank you. So while we await the resumption of racing at 10:58 a.m. for race 16, the school third 8, we'll have the presentation of medals for the winner of race 15, Year 10 first 8, a win for St Ignatius College Riverview. Ignatius are represented by Arthur Roche, Charles Holt, Charlie Shaheen, Hudson Shaw, Iggy Jenkins, Darcy O'Shea, Xavier Dinan, Charlie O'Halloran, and their coxswain is Dax Cooley, and coach Hamish McDonald. Please join me in congratulating St Ignatius College Riverview. Welcome back to the 2025 Newington College Regatta. Just a short weather break there of some 20 minutes and race 16 is underway. It's the School Third 8, contested by 6 crews, 2 from St Joseph's, 2 from St Ignatius, and Scots and Shaw. So this morning we saw a win for St Ignatius College 1. Tommy Burton, Alexander, Raymond Nash, Ralph Tui, Max Remus, Alexander Briscoe, Jack Whitson, Patrick Cleary, and Andrew Bigg, Sam Vecchio, their Cox. So they're the crew to beat. In second place it was St Joseph's 1, Henry O'Malley, Will Brown, Lachlan Coman, Lachlan Farrell, Oliver France, Finn Garland, William Bailey, Lucas Marning, and George Young, their coxswain. And third place was the Shaw School, represented by Charlie Cooper, Harry Tyrrell, Gus Pritchard, Sam Advani, Alec Eldershaw, Elliot Gordon, Max Riddle, Dominic Walker, and Henry Johnson, their Cox. So that's how they finished earlier this morning. Looks as though it's St Ignatius College in lane 8. Who were, of course, our winners earlier this morning, who command the lead. Some 2 seconds behind them are their colleagues from St Ignatius. In lane 5, Nicholas Van Kerwick, Mykola Shmatuka, Duca Waldron, Kobe Ellis, Oliver O'Carroll, Noah Beardmore, Charlie Forshaw, and Henry Jewell, Marshall Devlin, and their Cox. And Scots have pushed themselves up into 4th place at this stage. Scots represented by Sam Marott, Will Netting, Teddy Alvarez Garcia, David Bye, Hugh Anderson, Jason Jang, Nick Phillips, Hugo Duplessis, Jack Shannon, their coxswain. So that's how they went through the top 4 through the 500 metres. They're approaching the 750 metre mark, 1,000 metres soon, so we'll have some updated times for you in just a short moment. But for the moment, St Ignatius setting the pace in this race and repeating their strong performance so far from this morning. Well, as the rain starts to come down again, we got a centre flattening out the course. It is the 2 St Ignatius crews in the lead. St Ignatius 1, of course, in lane 8. St Ignatius 2 in lane 5. And the Shaw School have just leapt ahead of Scots. And that's a really tidy looking performance by the boys in the Ignatius colours there. They're sitting up really tall and letting the boat run. Just a really nice, the boat's tracking really nice and flush across the water. Not a lot of vertical movement. That rowing hull in the water. Coaches down at the review program are really pleased with that. They've already opened their account with a number of wins today. St Ignatius College Review, again, proving to be one of the programs to beat in 25-26. And so this is the crew in lane 8, of course closest to the grandstand. And they've just passed the 1,500 metres. have a better idea about where these crews are placed as they come into view in front of the grandstand. But certainly St Ignatius won in lane 8. Doing really well at the moment. I think it might be St Joseph's in lane 6, occupying that second position, and the Shaw School in lane 7 just pursuing them in between Ignatius and Joey's. The boys will really be enjoying this flat water and the cool conditions created by the rain. Perfect conditions for rowing now on the course as St Ignatius looking poised to claim another win in the third 8, race 16 on the program this morning. And their coxswain Sam Vecchio are just pushing St Ignatius through the gears as they come into the final 100 metres of their race, and now looking very tidy indeed, and they are setting the standard for the rest of their season and firing a warning shot across the bow. Congratulations, St Ignatius. It's an all-the-way win, and the coaches will be pleased with that. But the race is tightening up between St Joseph's in lane 6 and Shaw in lane 7. St Joseph's going to claim the win, so they take second position. That's St Joseph's in lane 6 and Shaw in lane 7, who settle for third. In fourth place it'll be St Ignatius in lane 5. And fifth place will be the Scots College in lane 4. Congratulations to Scots just going through the gears. That's Sam Marott, Will Netting, Teddy Alvarez Garcia, David Byer, Hugh Anderson, Jason Jang, Nick Phillips, Hugo Duplessis and Jack Shannon. Congratulations, boys. And all of a sudden we are into the 4s again. And race 17 is underway. Conditions on the course perfect for 4 rowing. No chop or roll on the water at this stage. So the school 4th 4 underway. It's the second race of this morning's proceedings. And earlier this morning we saw a win for St Ignatius. That crew comprised of Archie Coble, William Brown, Archer Love, Angus Field, and their cox Thomas Brednam. Second place this morning went to Shaw, represented by Hugh Riley, Harry Fuses, Campbell Binney, Peter Komonakis, and Seb Cheers. And third place was St Joseph's, Marco Farnese, Samuel Lonergan, Fletcher Stephen, Thomas Smythe, and Cooper Watkins. So, coming through the 500 metres, it is the Shaw School who well, they appear to be enjoying the lead, but we'll just wait for some updated numbers. Haven't seen the St Ignatius crew just yet. You can just see the crew from the Scots College in lane 3 on the live stream. That's Marcus Lamb, Eric Johansson, Hamish Marr, Tennyson Bors, and Lewin Galvin Bazanoro. Their coxswain. So as we approach the 750 metre mark, it is St Ignatius in lane 6, ahead of St Joseph's next to them in lane 5, and also Shaw in lane 2. And yeah, that's the way he'll go through the 1,000 metre mark. St Ignatius in lane 6. That's a really, really tiny row from those guys in the St Ignatius colours. Shaw School currently in second place, but really not much in that. Kings are also in the mix there as well. Fantastic shot there of the Blue Mountains behind these school 4th fours on the Regatta Centre this morning. And save for the blustery conditions we had while the second and first eights were on the course early this morning, we've had some pretty tidy conditions for 8-oared and 4-oared rowing. That's a crew from the Shaw School just on the screen there before. So we'll have some updated numbers shortly, but it was the Shaw School just behind St Ignatius through the 1,000 metres. So plenty of work to do, and they're playing catch-up. And then pursuing St Ignatius through the 1,500 metres. And there they go, in lane 6. Some big bodies in that St Ignatius crew, and just leaning back and letting the boat do the work. Good amount of boat run. And it's trimming really nicely through the water. Yep, St Ignatius through the 1,500 in a time of 5:18. Well, they went through slightly faster this morning, did the crew from St Ignatius, 5:16 earlier this morning in race 6. So perhaps a little bit of fatigue creeping into this morning's programs, but of course, as Marty and I explained this morning, plenty of opportunity for each of these young athletes to work their way into the season and to get some race experience under their belt out here at the Regatta Centre early on. Well, the Shaw School being urged on by their supporters in the stands, and St Ignatius still looking the goods though, out there in the lead in lane 6. Kings in lane 7, well, they're probably running third at the moment. St Joseph's probably in 4th in lane 5. And each of these crews now just testing themselves through the gears. St Ignatius are looking very tidy indeed. And that is another really fine win by the school from Riverview, St Ignatius College. Second place goes to the Shaw School in lane 2, and third place to Kings in lane 7. Joey's claim 4th place, 5th place to the Shaw School in lane 8. In 6th place, it's going to be a battle between Sydney Grammar and Scots. I think it's going to be Sydney Grammar, who have just done enough. Crossing the line in just a moment. Scots College settling for 7th. So while we wait for the presentation of medals for the fourth four, race 18 has gotten underway down at the eastern end of the Regatta Centre. It's the school third four race, the second race, of course, of this morning's program, and it was a win this morning for Shaw in lane 5. Shaw represented in that race by Micah Minchin, Will Reed, Xavier Coker, Henry Smythe, and Austin Anderson, who was their cox. Second place was St Ignatius, Sydney Roche, Edward Bateman, Harry Walker, Samuel Barry, and Nicholas Colbert. And third place was Kings, and that was Harry Bullhausen, Jock McGrath, Jack Webster, Lachlan Arentz, and Digby Norton Knight, their coxswain. So, through the 500 metres, it's St Ignatius, Kings, and St Joseph's. So, Shaw School with a bit of work to do to edge themselves back up into the top 3. But while we wait for the school third four to come up to the business end of the Regatta competition lake, we'll have the presentation of medals. For the fourth four, please congratulate St Ignatius College Riverview, represented by Archie Coble, William Brown, Archer Love, Angus Field, their coxswain Thomas Brednam, coached by Sarah Diu. Well, fascinating race unfolding at the pointy end of the competition in race 18 here between Shaw and St Ignatius. Shaw in lane 3, St Ignatius in lane 6. So a couple of boats between them, but 0.37 the margin. So would not be surprised if we saw a real high-octane finish to this race between those two crews as they compete for the advantage and setting the standard for the rest of their season. It's the crew from the Shaw School on the live stream and on the big screen if you're out here at the Regatta Centre. It's Micah Minchin, Will Reed, Xavier Coker, Henry Smythe, and Austin Anderson looking really sharp and really just unbothered by that boat. It's a fantastic effort. And the Riverview crew in lane 6, with whom they're competing just in the foreground a moment ago, passed through the 1,500 metres. So down in the business end of the competition lake now. And Shaw School commanded a narrow advantage. That's Kings in lane 7 who have just gone through. And the race now is spreading out a bit. It's at Scott's and St Joseph's coming in 4th and 5th positions respectively as they make their way into the final 500 metres of this morning's racing for them. Shaw School look as though they are making a move on the Ignatius crew. Lanes 3 and lane 6, who we're paying attention to at the moment. And the Ignatius just having a look over their right shoulders to have a look at the crew from the Shaw School, but I think Shaw have done enough to claim the third four at the Newington Regatta. Congratulations to the Shaw School. St Ignatius having to settle for second place. And third place is a little bit of a distance back, but it will go to the King's School in lane 7. Congratulations to Kings. Clean conclusion to that race. Fourth place looking as though it will go the way of the Scots College ahead of Joey's, who are themselves just ahead of Newington, our hosts in lane 8. And to conclude race 18, Sydney Grammar School in lane 5, concluding the first hit out of their season. Congratulations to Sydney Grammar School, Maximilian McKnight, Jarrett Kwan, Marcus Shipway and Ryan Teresia, Cox by Dashil Kwang, coached by Kenneth Major. That concludes the school third four. A win for the Shaw School in lane 3, second place to St Ignatius in lane 6, third place to Kings in lane 7, fourth place Scots in lane 4, fifth place St Joseph's in lane 2, sixth place Newington in lane 8, and seventh place Sydney Grammar in lane 5. While we're waiting for the Shaw School to make their way over to the pontoon, move right along to race 19, which is underway. For the second race of the second four this morning, and the crews have just passed through the 1,000 metres, and it is a fascinating competition that is developing. It is St Ignatius, Shaw and Kings at the front end of the competition, some 3 seconds back to St Joseph's, but that is going to be a fascinating encounter once the crews make their way down to the business end of the park for the minor placings and for the win as well. Any of those crews really eligible for the win here at the moment. So earlier on this morning we saw the second four race claimed by Shaw. Matthew Giretta, Xavier Devaney, Braden McDonald and Taj Robertson, coxed by Alex Goulbin. Second place was to St Ignatius, represented by Kieran Dennis, Oliver Tucker, Ignatius, Babbage Hockey, Luke Delaney and Zach Burton. And third place went to St Joseph's, represented by Fletcher Grenfell, Thomas Sieve, George Graham, Julius Lamb, and coxed by Zachary Taylor. Well, this time around, Kings have inserted themselves into the proceedings, and coming through the 1500 metre mark, it is really tight, but it is the Shaw School in the lead, 0.71 back to St Ignatius. Kings currently occupying third position from St Joseph's, who are in fourth at the moment. So the race spreading out a little bit from when we saw them come through the 1,000 metres, but nevertheless Shaw in the ascendancy, but plenty of water yet to row as they contend with St Ignatius for the leading of that pack. We'll wait for that race to conclude. Please congratulate the winners of race 18, the school third four. A win for the Shaw School. Shaw represented by Micah Minchin, Will Reid, Xavier Coker, Henry Smythe, and their coxswain is Austin Anderson. Please congratulate the Shaw School. Back on the lake, race 19 is roaring to a conclusion, and the battle now between the Shaw School in lane 3 and St Ignatius College in lane 5, and Shaw have extended the lead that they enjoyed through the 1500 metres. Really good to see. Congratulations to Shaw. It's a clean win, and now getting their season off on the right track. St Ignatius settling for second place. Third place will go the way of the King's School in lane 8. Fourth place to St Joseph's in lane 4. Fifth place will probably go the way of Newington in lane 2. And the Scots College in lane 7 to claim 6th place. So in the second four, the Shaw School maintaining their win from earlier this morning. Congratulations there to Matthew Giuretta, Xavier Duvernay, Braden McDonald, and Taj Robertson and Alex Goulburn. Second place was St Ignatius, Kieran Dennis, Oliver Tucker, Ignatius Babbage Hockey, Luke Delaney, and Zach Burton, their Cox. And third place, King's School, represented by Denver Purdon, Charlie Jones, Nicholas Walsh, Sam Watt, and Oliver Forrester. And the Sydney Grammar School, just finalising that race, congratulations there to Charles Castaldi, George Wilson, Samuel Lai, Alexander Randall, and their coxswain, TJ Abdel Syed. So we've got to start, and in fact, we're halfway through race 20 for the school first four. Second race, of course, of this morning's program. And this morning, earlier in the proceedings, was a win for Shaw School. That was Christopher Ewan, Rupert Forrester, Ryan Doherty, Ed McDonald, and Eddie Brooks. In second place was St Ignatius, represented by Henry McRae, Oliver Eisenhower, Benjamin Eisenhower, Thomas Tancred, and James Stack. And third place was claimed by Kings, Patrick Yee, Henry Harvey, Max McGraw, Harry Irving, and Keishon Jayasuriya was their coxswain. So, of course, those three crews looking to back up a strong performance off this morning. Just before that race comes into view in front of the grandstand, at the presentation of medals for the school second four. Winners of the school second four at the Newington College Regatta 2025, the Shaw School. Shaw represented by Matthew Duretta, Xavier Duvernay, Braden McDonald, Taj Robertson, and their coxswain Alex Golban. Please congratulate the Shaw School. And turning our attention back to the competition lake, well, a fantastic drama developing on the course. From the perspective of the grandstand, a really, really tight encounter for the minor placings. At the lead, though, it does appear as though it's the crew from St. Ignatius College in lane 3. And competing with them really well is the crew over here in lane 8 from Scots. And also Shaw over in lane 1. And Shaw claimed the win earlier on this morning, but St. Ignatius looking to revise that statistic in the second race of this morning's program. And they are looking really well poised as they come into the final 50 metres of their race. No panic, and they're happy to let the boat do some work for them and enjoy the final 25 metres of their race. It's going to be a win for St. Ignatius College out of lane 3. Well done. And they'll be really pleased with that. So to their coach, Simon Kinderas. Second place goes to Shaw in lane 1. Third place is tight, but it'll go to the Scots College in lane 8. Fourth place to Kings in lane 6. Fifth place to St. Joseph's in lane 7. Sixth place to Newington in lane 5. And yet to finish, Sydney Grammar in lane 4, looking poised to claim 7th place. Followed by Sydney Boys High School in lane 2. So this morning's program nearing completion. Races 21 and 22 yet to row. The school's second and first eights. But in the meantime, we'll have the presentation of medals for the school first four. It was a win for St Ignatius College Riverview, represented by Henry McRae, Oliver Eisenhower, Benjamin Eisenhower, Thomas Tancred, and James Stack. Ladies and gentlemen, please congratulate winners of the school first four, St Ignatius College Riverview. So we're about to have a start in race 21, the penultimate race on this morning's program, this school second 8. And early this morning it was a win for the Shaw School, represented by Alex Rogan, Ollie Mott, Lachlan McIntosh, Austin Hamilton, Ollie Koch, Charlie Glancy, Alistair Curry, Liam Kennedy and their Cox, Will Gandy. So they're the crew to beat. So the schoolboys' second 8 race early this morning was won by Shaw in a time of 5 minutes 58 seconds. Of course, if you've been joining us throughout the duration of this morning's program, you might remember Shaw assisted down the course by a fairly strong tail breeze blowing from east to west at that time. Of course, the conditions flattening out now and just a light dusting of rain, making the competition lake very fair indeed, and we are underway in the second 8. It's fantastic to see each of the schools represented in these 2 premier events. So, of course, Shaw won this early this morning. Second place to St Ignatius. Third place was to Newington. Fourth place was to St Joseph's. Fifth place was to Kings. Sixth place was to Scots. Seventh place to Sydney Grammar. And 8th place to Sydney Boys High. So plenty to play for each of these crews, except perhaps for sure looking to maintain their record and come away with the silverware today at the Newington Regatta. Shaw rowing today, this morning I should say, out of lane 8 in this race. And so they'll be closest to the grandstand. It'll be good to be up nice and close to the action if you're out here at the Regatta Centre. Of course, you're plenty close to the action on the live stream as well. That footage of the Scots College crew in lane 4, the BRO official boat. But there they are, the crew from the Shaw School in lane 8, making the best of things early on in this race. They passed through the 500 metres in a time of 1 minute 27 seconds and 77 milliseconds. St Ignatius, Newington, St Joseph's, Kings, Scots, St Joseph's and Sydney Grammar. Scots, Sydney Grammar and Sydney Boys High, I should say. That was how they went through the 500, and the race opening up a little bit, but certainly not much distance between the top 4 crews. And plenty of water left to row in any event. Of course, St Ignatius has a program known for their tenacity in these 2,000 metre races and coming home really strong in the third and final 500 metres. So I would not be riding off that St Ignatius crew at all. Early lead enjoyed by Shaw, of course, but it's a real gutsy row from them earlier on this morning. Of course, the margin earlier this morning was 6 minutes 2 seconds, so quite substantial in the scheme of things, probably a boat length. And so St Ignatius will be looking to close that margin. And through the 1,000 metres, Shaw School certainly our leaders. St Ignatius pursuing them, followed by St Joseph's, Newington, Kings and Scots. And that is an exemplary performance of 8-oared rowing from that Shaw crew in lane 8. They've managed to, it's really clean feathering, and they're keeping the blades off the water, which is fantastic to see. Really well drilled crew. Testament to Gary Ubergang and the rest of the Shaw School Rowing program. Of course, a school that's enjoyed many victories over the many decades of AAGPS rowing. Now looking very good in this school second 8 race. And I'd suggest they've even extended that lead over St. Ignatius, who are currently occupying second place. Ignatius certainly not out of it. 3.77 seconds the margin. Back to St. Joseph's, currently in third place, and they're rowing out of lane 2 over the far side. And Newington currently occupying fourth place, and they've got some work to do to catch up to them. They're to push their way into the top 3 at their host regatta. The rain coming down again as we get into the final stages of this second 8 race, and you can hear the cheer from the crowd in support of the Shaw School. They're in lane 8, closest to the grandstand, and being urged on now. St. Ignatius in second place, not too far behind them, and they are now responding. Both those crews lifting their rate of striking in order to try and squeeze all they can out of the last 100 metres or so of this course, but it is looking as though it is going to be another win for the Shaw School in the second 8, and a fantastic piece of clinical rowing to take them over the line. Congratulations to the Shaw School. Second place goes to St. Ignatius. It's going to be St. Joseph's in third place. Fourth place, it's tight, but looking as though it'll go the way of our hosts, Newington College. Kings having to settle for fifth place, not too far behind them at all. And the Scots College will claim sixth place. Seventh place looking as though it will go the way of Sydney Grammar School in lane 3. And followed by Sydney Boys High School, just taking their crew through the gears. Lucas Wang, the coxswain in that boat. Unofficially, that race was won by the Shaw School in a time of 6 minutes and 15 seconds, so some 17 seconds slower than this morning's heat. But, of course, no raging tail breeze this time round to assist the crews across the line. But now, the final race of this morning's program on the course and underway. It's race 22, the first 8. Of course, this morning, the race was won by the Shaw School in a time of 6 minutes, 22 seconds. St. Ignatius was second, followed by St. Joseph's, Kings, Newington, Sydney Grammar, Scots, and Sydney Boys High School in that order. And through the 500 metres, I should say, it's St. Ignatius who have leapt out to the early lead, but 0.27 the margin. So really not much in that at all, but this race will be really important. A barometer for the rest of the season for each of these crews. Just wanting to set the standard. Fatigue in the legs. What can these crews produce in the final 1,500 metres of their efforts this morning? St. Ignatius College on the screen there in lane 8. Their first 8 coached by Matthew Curtin. Of course, St. Ignatius, the incumbent holders of the Major Rennie Trophy. And they have opened a substantial lead over the Shaw School now, some 4.3 seconds. And while we wait for the first 8 race to come down to us and pass through the finish marker at the grandstand, we'll present the medals for the school second 8. Winners of the second 8, the Shaw School. Shaw represented by Alex Rogan, Ollie Mott, Lachlan McIntosh, Austin Hamilton, Ollie Kosh, Charlie Glancy, Alastair Curry, Liam Kennedy, and their coxswain, Will Gandy. Won't you congratulate the Shaw School, winners of the school second 8. We're approaching the final 250 metres of this morning's racing. Or the final 500 metres, I should say. And here comes St. Ignatius. 4:34 through the 1500. That's some 15 seconds faster than they went through the 1500 earlier this morning. And they've extended their lead over the Shaw School. 5.18 in the margin now. St. Joseph's currently occupying third, and not a far distance then back to King's. Sydney Grammar currently occupying 5th place, and Newington in 6th. I'll have a better idea about these margins as they come through the 250 metres. But now is really an opportune time for each of these crews to test themselves at the business end of the Regatta Park for the first hit out of their 25-26 seasons. Our reigning champion, St. Ignatius, though, certainly in the ascendancy and showing the rest of the opposition how it's done. Certainly firing a shot across the bow. If they can go on with this lead that they've enjoyed. And just going through the gears now, St. Ignatius in lane 8. Urged on by their colleagues and supporters. Shaw School over there in lane 1 on their far side of the course. Currently occupying second place, but St. Joseph's and King's really bearing down upon them. And this is a clean row from St. Ignatius. The boat skips through the water and it's a win. The first for the 2025-26 season. And they'll be pleased with that, St. Ignatius, and that is the job done. Shaw claims second, third place to St. Joseph's, fourth place to King's in lane 3, fifth place to Sydney Grammar in lane 5, sixth place to Newington in lane 7, seventh place to Scots in lane 4, to finalise the race and the regatta, Sydney Boys High School in lane 2. Recapping the results of the school first 8 for the 2025 Newington Regatta. First place winners St. Ignatius College Riverview. Second place the Shaw School. Third place, St Joseph's. Fourth place, the King's School. Fifth place, Sydney Grammar. Sixth place, Newington. Seventh place, Scots. Eighth place, Sydney Boys High School. And while we wait for St Ignatius to come over to the medal presentation pontoon, we'd like to take the opportunity to remind all athletes, coaches, school, teachers alike that while we've enjoyed the second half of this regatta relatively uninterrupted by the weather, there is a storm system approaching, coming over the Blue Mountains, due to arrive at about midday, so in about 5 minutes' time. So please just ensure that you arrange for your crews to come off the water as quickly as possible, and to be mindful when loading the trailers. If you can otherwise return the bow numbers as quickly as possible, that would be appreciated by our volunteers, and thank you to our host Newington College this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, the presentation of medals for the winners of the school first eight for the 2025 Newington College Regatta. A win for St Ignatius College Riverview. Noah Coble. Jack Hare. Thomas Roche. William Bryant. Banjo Metcalf. Hamish Walker. Hugo Brown, Julian Carr, and their cox, Ryan McNulty. Please congratulate winners of the first eight, St Ignatius College Riverview. The presentation of the first eight concludes this morning's regatta. Thank you for your company if you've joined us out here at the Sydney International Regatta Centre. And equally if you've joined us on the live stream. And we'll see you back out here in a few short weeks.